right. I know probably some people will continue to join us, but I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot to cover. Thank you everyone for joining us. I know Alan can't make it tonight because he's flying back from New York. I also wanted to, I know we have a lot of items for like upcoming events on the agenda, but depending on how long we take to discuss the other items, basically if those race directors, if you could just let us know if you need something from the board. Otherwise, I'm just going to assume the races are going to be going on fine. We'll have more of an update from Mark for Vernonia because that's this weekend and that's like kind of like turkey trot, all hands on deck type thing. But if we don't have time to get to all of the upcoming events, it's not a huge thing. I just want to make sure we cover everything else fully. So, oh, there's Joel. Cool. So I will call us to order, and the first order of business is to approve the minutes of the March 12th meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Okay. I second the motion.
Okay, so Nicki moved and Margie seconded. Okay. All in favor, or there were anybody have any amendments to the any corrections or updates? Nope. Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? Okay, Debbie opposes?
No.
Oh, you approve, okay. It's timing. Okay, motion passes. The minutes are approved from the last meeting. Okay. Treasurer's report. Debbie, you want to get us started?
Okay, I'm gonna share a screen here. Let's see. Not that one. Oops. Okay, so basically I can't see very well. This one. Oh, no, sorry. Oh, right down here. Okay, so the cash balances are what we want to know first. Here, you can read it here. We're still making the move all the way to On Point from Wells Fargo. That should be complete by the end of this month. We were working on moving all of the auto drafts still. Mostly that's been all done. I think that we're just got some clingers, some hangers on, and then we will actually close the Wells Fargo, move everything out. So that's the cash and balances. The other report that people like to see is races. Here are races so far 2024. The income here and the race expense does bring in, for these races that were at the beginning of the year, it brings in the income and the expense for the whole race, even though it was prior fiscal year. I brought it in so you can see what exactly that race netted. So Ralph's Run, Hagmud, Shampooey. Ooh, Vernonia's looking really good right now, but we'll wait till the expenses come in, of course. If you're a race director of any of these and you don't feel like that's quite right, please let me know. I think I've got it all categorized correctly. Valerie, you can help me if not, but those look like the numbers so far. So those are our race numbers, and they do include, like I said, the prior year expenses and race income.
Could I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
And I apologize for missing last meeting, but why did Hagmud usually doesn't lose money? So I'm just kind of curious what happened.
Yeah,
did they buy more? Sometimes they buy a lot of merch though, so maybe that's what happened.
I would say having been there, two main reasons. One is the numbers are down this year, so less income. Yeah. And the second is that there was an issue with traffic. They had to hire an additional person for traffic control, and that was an added expense from previous years. So.
Okay. Well, hey, Shampooey made money, so I'm happy.
And the two things that Mark said are exactly what I noticed, even though I didn't track those races. They were a little bit before me or as I transitioned in. But yes, that's what I noticed as well. More traffic. I think I heard that the Hagmud was bad weather too, so people didn't.
Oh yeah.
Or anyway. As a little aside, my friend and I went out to Hag and did the mud trail around the whole lake 2 weeks ago, and it was still pretty muddy at that point.
Oh yeah, it's muddy all the time. I live in Forest Grove, so I'm out there all the time, and it's good and muddy almost, yeah, not year round, but all the time.
They had a big washout there for part of it down
Yeah.
past
Yeah.
the bridge, but anyway, that's there. So like I said here, if you feel like you're a race director and these don't look correct, just let me know. I think that's the main part of that's unless you have specific questions about other parts of this, that's basically my report there, but I think the agenda has us talking a little bit about a few other things, right?
Yeah, I was gonna bring up two things specifically. The graphic designer, I have been in contact with Amanda, who was our graphic designer, and we currently are paying her $1,000 a month. And what I asked her for was just an estimate of how many hours a month she thinks she's working, because I wanted to make sure, were we paying her what she
Too much, too little.
too little, whatever. And my proposal was not knowing how many hours she was working. If she wasn't doing a lot of hours, could we cut the payment down a little bit? And she indicated that she was working about 35 hours a month on the newsletters, and then extra on the new logos that she's been doing for certain people. And so if she were to charge, for example, $20 an hour, which is low for a graphic design artist, but she is a new graduate from PCC just 2 years ago. So she's an inexperienced graphic artist. So then that would, just for the newsletter, come out to about $700 a month. And so what I was proposing was that we possibly reduce her pay. I also think we could cut back on her hours, because she spends a lot of time on the art part of it, like making the backgrounds to the newsletters and stuff. But she has over a year's worth of I would say templates, I think. And so I'm just thinking if she could like reuse the February artwork for the next February, so she's not having to redo hand artwork for each newsletter, make it easier for her. She wouldn't have to put as many hours in. But anyway, I was thinking about suggesting that we reduce her fee to $700 a month. That would save us $300 a month, about $3,600 for the year, which would then in turn help us pay for additional group runs with foot traffic. So
she would pay extra for the logos if you do.
but she would then charge extra for doing logos if we wanted her to design new logos for events. So that was something I wanted to suggest to the group. What do you all think?
Have we considered just seeing if a volunteer is available to do the sort of work that's qualified?
I think we've tried to find people to do it before, and it's very hard to find somebody who has the skills to do that. I know putting out some of the stuff in Constant Contact is very simple if you know what you're doing, but we couldn't find people, or I should say the previous board couldn't find somebody who was willing and able to do it as much as we needed them to do it. It's kind of like when we were looking for an editor for the Old Oregon Distance Runner, finding somebody with a particular skill set to do it and not having to find somebody new all the time, just paying somebody professionally to do it.
I understand, but I don't know if we've tried since the previous board left, and that might change the outcome of a call for volunteers, possibly. Might not. Might be worth trying.
Okay.
I also do that kind of work, but I already do so much for the club.
I know,
don't
I don't want to overwhelm our current crew of volunteers with something that it's on the books, and so I don't worry too much for that type of professional. Adnan?
I feel very conflicted saying this, but I guess I'm surprised by those numbers. I currently have the March newsletter pulled up. And I mean, if this took 35 hours to put together, it's not exactly what I would be expecting. So at least something like a request for proposals or something, I think may be appropriate. Yeah, just because that was a bit surprising to me when you mentioned that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really just, it's just a whole lot of clip art Shamrocks stamped. And so, yeah, I went specifically to go look at the art in the background that you mentioned, and spending more than an hour a day, all month, every single day. I guess, I'd be expecting a movie, but maybe that's just me. Again, I may be going too far here. I really don't know about that industry or like what people charge, if it takes, but yeah, sorry, just my 2 cents.
I will say she does put up 2 newsletters a month at least. So it's not just the one, there are 2 that she works on. I thought it was high too. I didn't realize she put in that many hours, and that's why I was trying to think of if we cut the hours, but then said, I'm not sure what she does to do the artwork, because I'm not a graphic designer, so I don't know. And I don't know what she was requested to do. I know they hired her initially because they simply didn't have the bandwidth for the people who were currently on the board at the time to do it. So we could do this as twofold, is cut the amount paid and also see if we can send out a request. We'd like to make this a volunteer position. Does anybody out there have a skill set? And this is what it entails, working with Constant Contact, and because we provide all the content and then she makes it pretty and sends it out and does her thing.
How often are new logos needed, and what's the requirement to request logos? Like, who approves a new logo being made for the club?
The logos were basically up to the race directors, and so we've had the same logos for a lot of years. But when we rebranded Ralph's Run, we needed a new logo for that from Y2K. Same thing with Dave's Solstice. And Pumpkin Ridge, we need a new one for that one because we can't use garlic anymore. So
Yeah.
I think there's not going to be a whole lot of logo work once we get these current logos done.
Right.
So,
That makes sense. That makes
Charissa?
sense.
Oh, I just kind of wanted to support what Adnan said. I mean, just, I hate to criticize anyone, and I don't mean it that way, really, but when I did this job for another nonprofit, I did all their newsletters, but I wrote their newsletters too. I did all the graphics. I did photography. I did their website. I managed their email for about those hours. So it does seem a little high to me too, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's all.
Okay. Jenny?
I'm not opposed to paying people to do those kinds of things because, I mean, well, you all volunteers are probably more reliable than PTA volunteers perhaps, or other people who get really busy, but having someone paid to do something puts the priority on that. That doesn't mean that it won't get done, like Carissa says. I think it's a good idea to call for volunteers. Also, I think there should be a job description, something that's very specific as to what this person would do, a graphic designer. I searched for what I could find on any kind of description on what she would do, what maybe the prior administration had in the emails, and I couldn't find anything at all detailing what she did, or any kind of here's what we'll pay you, or any kind of detail about it, which isn't a bad thing. It's just something that we should look at going forward. We do have all these funds in the budget. So that's something, and it might be something it isn't necessarily what we should always rely on, but it might be something, it's her income that she's, relying on. So giving her some notice might be good before we bring it down a lot or eliminate that altogether. Yeah.
Is she actually writing the newsletter, or she's facilitating posting the newsletter?
Right. We're providing the content to her. So I'll send her a draft of everything and say, we need this to go out on this date. And then she'll write it up and do her thing and say, this is the first draft, and I'll approve it, and she'll send it out.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I see Daniel has a comment. I don't mind paying for these services. I don't want to do it. And if I did, I would no longer do it for free. And I agree with paying for it, but we may be able to get a little more appropriate rate. I also can't blame anyone for wanting to maintain income. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
She was the one who proposed lowering her pay, not us. So it was her proposal to go from
okay.
1,000 to
It's their
700.
idea.
Yeah,
So,
that's
and with
positive.
the ex-
That's positive, so.
That's a rare thing for an employee to say, "You're paying me too much. Pay me less
Well,
money."
yeah,
So,
and also when you look at how much people usually get paid for graphic design, again, we're not asking her to do very much, so that's why she's going for the lowest, 20,
Very low rate.
the very low rate. A lot of them get paid between up, $50, $60 an hour. So
she's aware that
she's aware that she's
inexperienced.
inexperienced and doesn't want that high of a pay rate. She proposed the.
Well, I mean, it's looking for a win-win for both sides, right? So she's
Yeah.
recognizing that we're a nonprofit, hopefully, and that we're needing to make an adjustment, but
Yeah.
this is also helping her build her career and her resume. So, I think that there is something to be said for that. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm hearing people don't mind paying for the services, but we want to maybe possibly look at seeing if anybody would be willing to volunteer for it from our membership base. But if not, we can continue to pay Amanda, but go for the $700 a month rate.
And
Yep.
just one question, we're not dissatisfied with her work, right? There's nothing, or her personality, dealing with her personality or anything else? Okay,
No.
yeah.
Joel?
Yeah,
Joel?
I would, can you guys hear me again? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, maybe reaching out to the membership base to see if anyone wants to volunteer to do it. But I mean, I think that's great that she's kind of able to, at least negotiate kind of a little bit of a lower rate. And so, yeah, I would agree with that as well.
Okay. So I will go ahead and move forward with that and work with Amanda on revising that. I know she just sent an invoice for the previous month for the 1,000, and I told her to go ahead with that because I didn't know what we were going to decide. And then I'll let her know in the future if she's for billing starting from May, that it would be the 700. Okay, we'll go on that. And then hopefully she finishes the logos before the end of April, but any logos after that would be extra work or charge on her part. Okay. The other part of the budget I wanted to talk about was the group training runs. And we had some big discussions on that one via email. And I just want to emphasize that I do not have a whole lot of, strong feelings one way or the other with this. I kind of feel like if I was going to focus on something, I'd focus on just putting our events on. But we have had members say that they would like something on the west side. And the group on the east side has worked well. Hal and I met with Christian at the west side store last night. And they have right now, they said about 10 to 15 pretty solid people each week, and they're hoping it's going to grow over the summer. And Hal has volunteered to be the coordinator to purchase the food once a month. So we would have an ORRC person who would be actually doing the purchasing. I also confirmed with the Selwood group and the West Side group that we would not be doing drinks, that we're just doing the food. And the Selwood group last week, their numbers were down to about 250 for the food, which is more what we thought they were going to be. So I also thought about what everybody was saying about Vancouver, and I actually checked the membership database, and we only have about 30 people who are members in Vancouver. So I'm not sure if there's a huge need for an ORRC group run there. But Margie lives there, so I don't know. What do you think, Margie?
Well, I was just going to say, that might be one of the things where we just publish out, hey, in the Vancouver area, there is a group run. ORC members are more than welcome to join in with the foot traffic group. And here's the night and time it is. Just publishing it out there. So, and then if seems to be like a larger group, I kept looking. I've got things on Thursdays. I got things on Monday. Now, if they did it on Wednesday, I might be able to make it once in a while. But so I just don't know that I could be dependable. So
How? Okay, how?
I did have a glass of the beer that they had in their keg, and it was good.
Yeah, Christian has a
So-
keg store.
And I went back to the store and talked to Christian, and he said, yes, they will keep a keg of beer available. Went to the 2 pizza stores that they mentioned, and both of them are like, we would love to work with you. So
Awesome. Joe?
As far as Vancouver, the Clark County Running Club is already a pretty popular big group there, and they have a lot of runs themselves. So I don't know, if we offered free pizza or something, I think it would probably be a free pizza for the Clark County Running Club group run. So as Margie said, I think there are probably opportunities for ORRC members to run in Vancouver with them.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I mean, it would be good publicity for ORRC to have a run there, but I don't think it's really necessary.
Yeah.
Because there's already a lot going on with the Clark County Running Club.
Yeah. Joel, did you still have your hand up from the last time, or you have a new one?
Well, I kind of both. I didn't put it down, but I do have one
Okay,
kind of,
wasn't sure if I missed that.
and I don't want to like this to sound like mean, but like I guess the question that comes up to me is like, I mean, obviously we're trying to get more people to, become members of the club, but what I mean, obviously, them having pizza and having these group runs is bringing extra runners into the store. What do we expect as a club? Is it something that we're just providing to our membership, or are they going to provide our membership like an additional discount, or I don't want to say what's in it for us, but what's in it for us?
Yeah, I wasn't impressed. I will say that our members do get a 10% discount at foot traffic stores. And we have also provided the brochures that we had at the Shamrock Expo. We also provided to the foot traffic stores. So that's available there. And they do packet pickup for us for Turkey Trot at their locations. So this would be another, we've partnered with them for a couple of different things. I think the main benefit for us, I think it'd be a win-win for both of us because many of our members have said they want a group run on the west side, and we don't have the volunteer to actually take that on and do that on a weekly basis. So they're providing a service to our members that we simply aren't able to provide at this point. So the hope would be that if we advertise this to our members, that the total number of people on the group run would grow and more people will become familiar with ORRC in the process. So it's kind of marketing, helping strengthen the relationship we already have with the store and providing a service to our members. So that's kind of the way I view it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I agree. I just was thinking, I'm like, I remember like in the past when I would go on, group runs, like, like it's not like it would be like, hey, come by for a beer, and obviously you go, you're gonna try out some shoes, you might buy some. So
Yeah.
I think that I think it's great, and I did momentarily forget that we do several of our packet pickups with them, and so that's a big bonus for sure.
Yeah.
yes, very big bonus.
So we're okay to add. Okay, so I'm kind of hearing that it would be okay for us to add, Deb?
Yes, I was just curious if about the keg situation, because I always thought that foot traffic had a tap in every store. So when I heard that we had to buy beer the first time, I was puzzled. Can anyone fill in just a little more detail on that?
The beer can we were at a restaurant.
We were at a restaurant, so they weren't actually eating at the store. They were going to a restaurant across the street. And I don't know if the Selwood one does, because they're now, instead of going, because the pizza place they went to across the street closed. So now they're going to another place, like a brew pub, which is also close by, and they're bringing the pizza to that brew pub. So they're not doing it at the store. Versus the west side, he talked about we could have the pizza delivered to the store and they could just drink the beer at the store. So, how?
Yes, that's what I went back and talked to Christian, and he agreed. They could do it at the store. We could have the pizza delivered to the store. They would provide the beer. And it's one of those things, if anybody wants something else to drink, then they have to make those arrangements.
Yeah.
Okay.
So am I okay to let the West Side store know that we're gonna go ahead and partner with them for this? So we would then not worry about Vancouver, but we would advertise their group runs just to our members if they're interested. We would have 2 group run locations in partnership with Foot Traffic, one at Selwood and one on the West Side, where we would purchase food, assuming pizza, for both of those locations. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm seeing head nodding. Awesome. All right,
Yep.
I will move forward with that then. Cool. Joel.
I do, okay, don't kill me for this, but just okay, like, so, but just in Portland Running didn't want to do anything because don't they sponsor the jackets for the 1200 Mile Club?
They do. Yes, Portland Running Club does sponsor the jackets. Yes.
But they don't, I mean, not in a mean way, they don't care. I mean, it's not it's not an exclusive kind of partnership. We could
No,
partner
no.
with all these stores.
No, we have agreements
Okay.
with them. Yeah.
All right, perfect.
And there's
Thank
no
you.
conflict of interest there or anything like that. I'm not worried about that.
Cool.
We could also, I know Portland Running Company does have group runs as well. So we could, and I know on our website, we do have a listing of all the different places people can go find group runs. So we can kind of highlight that as well as we advertise ours with the free food. Okay. Awesome. All right. I think that's it that I had for budget. Is anybody have other questions for Debbie? Okay. All right then. Moving on, just a quick recap of Shamrock Run went really well. Julie and I did the setup and the tear down, and then I know Valerie was there first day, and who all else was there? Joe and Carissa were there, and Margie was
Bonnie,
there.
Susan.
Everybody was there. So it seemed to go really well. I'm just going to bring up Portland Marathon Expo since it's kind of a similar category. We have paid for a booth for Portland Marathon Expo. And because of our previous relationship with the Portland Marathon, some of you I assume know, hopefully you all know, ORRC started the Portland Marathon way back in the day. And then we sold it to Old Portland Marathon Group, and now it's under new management. Anyway, they have a thing with their expo where they have passport. It's called a passport program where people go to people who have booths. If they sign up for the passport program, participants would go to the booth and get a stamp. And then if they get the stamps from all the passport booths, then they get entered into free prize drawings and stuff. So I said we would go ahead and enter, give away some free race entries and stuff. And they said normally it costs like $400 to be a member of the passport program at the expo. And because of our relationship, they're giving us that for free. So yeah, that'll be good. And then I also asked, because I indicated that we were going to be doing a race director workshop, because they were asking, how can we help you guys? We're really interested in partnering with you guys. And we were doing, they have a Tuesday thing where once a week they focus on running clubs in the area. And so we sent information for them to do that on their Tuesday posting on their social media. And then I also indicated that we would be maybe interested in doing an aid station for Portland Marathon. But then also, because with the race director workshop that weekend, I was asking, if not knowing where the expo is yet, because they haven't said where the expo is, if they could provide us with a free space wherever the expo is, so we could actually hold the October race director workshop in conjunction with the Portland Marathon Expo, and we could advertise it there too. So
it's normally been at the convention center. I would think it would be there again for the expo.
Yeah, it's been at the Hilton. Yeah, it's been at the Hilton for a long time center. So I just asked them, where is it going to be? And they haven't gotten back to me yet, but then I asked for it. So they haven't gotten back to me on that request. So I'll keep you all updated. But that's kind of an update on the Portland Marathon Expo.
Well,
Valerie.
The spinny wheel is very popular, but it needs a little TLC. some of the pins pop out on occasion. It's a little scary. So if somebody could kind of give it a little doctoring before then, that'd be great.
It's back in the garage and it did fall down and some things fell off of it, we think, but we took it home and we couldn't figure out where those pieces went to. So don't know if I'm hoping it's still pretty stable. Joel?
Well, when would we need to tell, like, I think a couple meetings back, I said I would be happy to kind of recruit volunteers and kind of man the aid station.
Mm-hmm.
When do you think that they would know if we would get one or not? And then, how much, I mean, when do you think we know about that?
I'm hoping soon. As soon as we know anything, I will let you all know as soon as they respond.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Deb.
Regarding the Shamrock event, how many names did you get and what are the plans for that? Because of the drawing. Did you announce the winners of the drawing for the free race entries?
I forget how many blank pieces of paper we had. We didn't use them all. We had a couple hundred, I think.
Yeah.
That filled out the things. But what the plan was is the people were supposed to enter their name and their email and their phone number on this piece of paper, and then we would draw names. As we were drawing names to give away the free entries, I would say 75% were illegible.
It was insane. It was absolutely
we had to keep drawing one after because we just could not read people's handwriting. So we did find 10 names
and we sent out them
and we sent them out their codes. So they are all good to go. But next time, what we think we would do, if there is Wi-Fi available or somehow make it, is create a form that they can then fill out online instead of us having to try to manually enter. Because we were going to enter all the names into Constant Contact and add them to our mailing list and stuff. It's like, this is not happening because these names are simply not readable. Okay. Nicki, do you have an update on the President's Challenge?
I was just going to type in the chat. You could do like a QR code, so they have to be there to get the code, and it links to a Google form,
Yes.
so then they could, enter it.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping.
Yeah, I know I'm on like 18 different email lists from the Shamrock Run Expo. Yeah, so we have, just with the volunteers, 120 possible people in the running of volunteers. That's a lot of volunteers for 3 races so far.
That's great.
Yeah, and most of them, or a bunch of them, were duplicates, so they're like actually in the running. And then I've reached out with Adnan, and I'm gonna be able to get the list with all of the races and whatnot for the participants in the races. So working on that with him.
Cool.
Yeah.
I got my email saying I'm still in the running.
You're in the running. I think you're 3 for 3, aren't you?
Yeah. She's going for the full President's
I'm going
Challenge.
for the full President's. That's my goal this year. We'll see.
The gold.
I don't have any conflicts, so I should be able to make all of them. Question is,
Right on. Well, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, the next item is Mark's proposal, the perks for ORRC race directors, board members, and coordinators. And so Mark had sent out a list of proposals.
If I may.
Yep, go for it.
So I put out 4 proposals, and already a fair amount of online discussion has occurred. And it's gotten me to reconsider which proposals I'm going to propose. Joe wrote a long and very thoughtful letter. Carissa did as well. Daniel, a while back, sent an email with a very Daniel kind of email. And the main point I'm taking from those 3 people is the idea that the idea of a stipend for race directors, free entries or free memberships, that kind of thing. From Joe's perspective, my takeaway is it runs against the culture that we want to have for ORRC. Carissa's concern is that any kind of financial compensation would be against the bylaws. And then Daniel's just a curmudgeon, so he's Daniel. He's a month older than me, so I can say that. And so it seemed to me that that I'm only going to present the result of my pondering all this is I'm only going to present one of the proposals. I'll get to that momentarily. Before I do, just want to say that my first thought about these things was because there's things we've done in the past, and should we do them again or not? And something I just want to say, take a moment to say that why I value this board and the people on this board is because it's a very thoughtful group of people, and I get ideas, and sometimes they're good ideas, and sometimes they're not good ideas, but people give them due consideration. And I'm the kind of person that I don't have to be right, but I do think we need to talk about, consider things, and this is one of those things that where I had ideas to throw it out there, and not all of it stuck and entirely appropriate. So anyhow, this is when if you have Deb, if you got the proposal list in front of you, I'm going to modify 3. The only one I'm going to propose is number 3, and I'm going to modify it. So if you want to taking the minutes, my motion will be race directors, board members, and coordinators. It's like communications, that non-board positions that serve a function. So race directors, board members, and coordinators get a free entry to any org event that they do, to any org event. They may get the entry during the calendar year they serve as a race. They serve, cross that out.
Yep.
And the entries are not transferred to other people. Like, hey, I'll give it to my husband or something like that. It's to the person. And I think, how can I say? I think, we need to, I'll open this up for discussion here momentarily, but I want to say that, we need to give, like I say, any person, a board member, race director, coordinators, they put in hours and hours, and and I think we need to reward them in some way. And to my mind, free entries is a worthy thing. And the other thing is, if y'all read Alan's email, he responded and he spoke of us, all of us, this group of people, as being ambassadors for the club. And I think there's truth in that as well, that we life gets in the way, life is busy, all that. But can you imagine a world in which every race director, board member, and coordinator attended virtually every ORRC race in the course of a year? It won't happen, life and all that. But imagine if it did, where everybody, and you might have been one time you're a runner, the next time you're a volunteer, the next time you just, whatever, you just show up, kind of a thing. To be ambassadors for the club, to be presence, to be a familiar face and all of that. And to me, that in and of itself is a thing of great value. And I think if you say to every person in this group, hey, you don't have an excuse, to not be there. You do, life, family, a little bit. But as far as like money would be an issue, and to my mind, that's why I think it's a reasonable thing, a benefit to give to that group of people. So I throw it out for discussion, for it, again it, modify it, whatever.
I do appreciate your modifications, because I don't know if all of you know this, but historically we have been giving free race entry to all board members and all race directors. So this is just kind of formalizing how it would work, and also adding coordinators in there who do a lot of work for the club as well. And I also I was thankful for Valerie that you sent the thing that said what we could give away and what we couldn't. And if it was a service, if we're putting on events and we just give free entry to our events, that would be okay financially. So I'm kind of So I'm comfortable with that. Let's see who's first. Carrie.
Yeah, I'm probably the newest person here, and my question is, are all of the current race directors members? And are
Yes.
they all okay? So what happens if we don't have a volunteer for a race? What happens at that point in time? What's the provision for going to the outside to bring somebody in, or has that ever happened?
That's honestly why some of our events we don't have anymore. For example, there were some races that we did that we couldn't find race directors for, and so we had to cut them.
Right.
And
Okay.
it's the same thing. Like we've had several people ask if we would bring back autumn leaves, and we simply don't have somebody volunteering to take it on. They want to see the race put on, but we don't have somebody who can do it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if we come up against some, if for example Daniel is leaving at the end of this year, and we can't find a new race director for dual. Then we probably have to cut that one. Now we have found race directors for Solstice Run. So what was that?
I was reading the website, the bylaws that are on the website, just trying to familiarize myself with a little bit, because I read all the commentary and have been thinking about everybody's thoughtful comments. And on the website, it looks like it calls for the ability to hire independent race directors. And I just didn't know if that was something that ever had come up, or if it was all volunteer by the current membership. So thank you for answering that question. So
Joe?
Yeah. Well,
go ahead, Mark.
Well, just say historically, it has happened a couple of times. Well, two things have happened. One is earlier we were talking about the Portland Marathon, where there was a volunteer race director for ORRC who took an event outside of ORRC to make it their own. Portland Marathon, Hood to Coast, both started as ORRC events where the race director said, "Hey, I want to take this on my own for a for-profit thing." So they ORRC incubate, but we're ORRC's the incubator, and people have started as volunteers and then took the event out. And there's been a couple of occasions where race directors have been brought in specifically to direct a race, and they received some kind of a stipend. Patrick Langley received some compensation. That's a whole saga from 2 years ago. Those of you who know that Patrick Langley was brought in and received some compensation for directing races. And then also Coach Jim, it's a whole nother thing that happened a few years ago. He was brought in, and it was I'm gonna say both of those situations did not end well. I think where if a person's primary motivation is financial, as opposed to doing it for the love of the club and for love of running, when we do bring someone in, historically anyway, they've not turned out well.
So Mark, since you and I think it was Alan raised this issue, I don't know the background on this, but what prompted the thought process from your perspective of wanting to raise this issue? Like what's going on there that you felt strongly to make these motions? What do you want the group to consider as to, because there was something there stirring in you that something needs to be done. And from my perspective, it's like, what is that? And should there be something else that the group should be considering for race directors? I don't know what that is, but I'm curious to hear feedback.
The motivation was, what can we do to bring in new race directors? What will make the difference for them? And say, well, why should I do it? Say, well, okay, this is what we can offer you. And so my initial proposal was different things that we have done in the past. And just for the discussion down to like the idea of the, like I said, the stipend and all, it's not going to fit. And I think part of it, how can I say, a point that I wanted to make, and I think if this is something it could be explicitly in the minutes, I would like that, because whether you are particularly if you are a race director, but also if you're like a coordinator, the expectation is that you provide your time for free. Okay, you spend hours doing whatever it is you do. You're not going to be compensated for your time. However, it is reasonable to be compensated for supplies and things that you know, for the race, for the club, you know, like for me, you know, like when I'm driving explicitly for race preparation, you know, getting mileage, getting gas money. If I need ink from my printer because I've been printing so many things for the race, I get reimbursed for the printer ink, you know, that kind of a thing.
Right.
And those are all reasonable race related expenses. And, you know, some of the coordinator positions are like that too. You might have those kinds of expenses, and those are you can donate those as well. A person can just do that. But if you know, it's entirely, to my mind, we have the right to be reimbursed for those kinds of expenses. Your time is free. If I got to buy printer ink and I got to buy paper, you know, the club can pay for that. And I think that's something to emphasize to all race directors that are concerned about, you know, whatever expenses they have, be sure and, you know, be reimbursed for what those reasonable things.
So as a race director, obviously you're putting in probably hours and hours of time to put on these races. From your perspective, do you feel like you are being reimbursed for those reasonable expenses that tie to the race?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right.
It's just that not everybody, not every race director is necessarily aware of them, and other people choose to not do it. You know, it's like I give my time to the club. Yeah, I'll buy some ink for my printer, and it's no big deal. I'll donate that as well in a sense. But you know, I'm at a place in my life where financially I'm in good shape, but I remember being in my 30s with a wife and 2 kids, and money was a lot tighter then, and every little bit, and I was still, even in those early days, willing to give my time to the club. But if I spent something that was for the club, I made sure that I got reimbursed for it.
Right.
So.
No, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Joe.
Yeah, as far as expenses, I think it's very reasonable to keep track of expenses, and then, but I would think that would be part of the budget for the race in the first place. So I think that's more of a race budget issue, and definitely if a race director is paying for something out of pocket, then they should be reimbursed. But I think that's more of an expense or a budget item for the race itself.
Yes.
So something that should be included or considered in the race budget. And then I had a couple other comments.
Sure.
As far as the providing a free race for people, I think that would be just expanding what we already do for volunteers at work events. So I don't think that would be too complicated. But the thing that I think would be a little complicated is defining who is a coordinator, because I could see some people receiving a free race for doing some things, and then somebody else that's doing something maybe a little less well-defined or something might notice that and say, why didn't I get a free race entry? And then it could get a little muddy and complicated. So I think that should be kind of defined, and if it can't really be defined, it might create a little bit of a sense of inequality among members, because so I just think that's a consideration, because I could see somebody saying, well, I did this and I didn't get a free entry, but that person did something that was a volunteer
And I think
effort
we've
for the club.
find our coordinators pretty well. They're all on the website now.
They have their own email.
And they have their own email, except for.
Okay, so that's an actual defined role in the club.
Yeah.
Coordinator is a term that's a well-defined term. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the litmus test is, do you have an ORRC email? You know, as a race director, as a board member, Charissa, you know, for example, you know, have ORRC emails. And I think that's kind of the litmus test to, you know, are you serving the club not just for one event, but on an ongoing basis?
Yeah.
So.
Joel's next.
Yeah, mine was actually just going dovetailing just what Joe had mentioned. like, I think that, it's, we're incentivizing in a nice way, volunteering, for the race. And so I think it's entirely reasonable that, we at least provide, free entry to the race director for races, he or she would want to do in the future. I think that's, 100% reasonable. I support that.
Yeah.
Daniel? He's pushing buttons. There he goes.
I'm on my tablet in the garage here. I've got an autism emergency right now. So when Mark was talking about, I want to ask him, when you're talking about free entries, are you talking about if I'm involved directly in 3 races and we have 10 races, that means I could potentially get 7 free entries, or I get 1 free entry for each event? Are we talking about all year long, I don't pay a race director fee?
Yeah, you just don't, for yourself, you would not pay a fee.
All year for however many events I'm not involved in.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. So here's my only thought here is this going to, I'm gonna quote my good friend Mark, the future, I don't know if it's his birthday yet. I know it's like right around the corner.
May 22nd. May
22nd. So I'm still a curmudgeon to him for another 2 weeks. But I'm going to quote him very well. Race director's prerogative. I really feel that those comp entries need to be built into their budget, so the race directors are able to account for having to give away some more free races. If you guys know me, I don't care. I will give away. I'll let anybody join my race for free. All you gotta do is ask. But and sometimes they don't even have to ask. But I'm not sure every race we're already kind of tight on how much per race runner we're spending. So I want to be sure that the budgets can handle that, unless the club wants to kick those in to the race director's budget so they don't have to account for them. I don't care if they get the free races or not. I just want to know does the race director have to account for another 15 or 20 free entries in their budget? And the answer, if it's yes, that's fine. We can charge more, or we can cut down something else, or we can just expect to do it. But I just want to know how we're going to have to budget for that.
I think it should be built into the race's budget, because you might get people using their free entry, but you also might have volunteers using their volunteer code, or you might have a
transfer to
another event because they paid for one event but then weren't able to do it, so they transfer. So there's any number of reasons why somebody might be entering your event and not paying.
I build in ample comps, as you guys know, into my races. I just want the race directors to have an expectation that they're expecting 250. If their bottom number for their range is 250, that they need to be budgeting as if you have 200, because 50 of those might be free and you're still going to have to pay for them. So you need to be sure that you're budgeting accordingly, which might kick your race fees into another up another nickel or something, to make sure that instead of charging 35, maybe you're charging 40 now, just to account for the comps. As long as we're aware of that, but I would really love this to be a race director's prerogative. And when I say that myself, you guys all know I build a ton of comps into both of my races, and everybody run mine.
Valerie?
Oh, a couple items. Oh, I want to make sure, like, back to the coordinators, that we're including people like Bonnie, who's constantly resupply. I mean, on top of what all the help she does at the races, she's always resupplying our boxes and first aid supplies and everything at the storage unit, and also Jeff Weirman, who helps with that. So are we including people like that?
He's the equipment coordinator, so he would get free entries.
Bonnie, we don't
consider her a coordinator. She's a race director. So
well, she's a race director now.
If she ever stopped being a race director and she wanted to continue doing what she does, we could probably make a more defined, like a co-equipment manager or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and then oh, to what Daniel said, in the past we've never really tracked the race entries maybe that's something like Adnan could dig into, because it'd be really interesting to see, because I don't think it's all that many free entries, maybe 10.
And it is tracked in run sign up.
Sign up, that's what I'm saying, maybe he could
Use a code.
just out of interest,
You can count how many coupons have been used and when and where they've been used.
But we've always had this, so I'm not, and I get, like, I think it's something that should be presented to the race directors, and if there was some big hubbub about it, I get it, but I doubt that since we have 4 race directors here or more. And so, and the other thing I wanted to say is, like, I know I saw in the emails things about doing this for service, and I don't think this takes away from that. I think the people that are race directors or on the board, I also see them volunteering at various, I mean, I see a lot of volunteerism and overlap. So I think it's just nice to show that little additional appreciation for all the time that some people put in. That's perfect.
Yep.
Out of curiosity, how many hours, Mark, do you feel on average it takes to race direct and coordinate all of that? That's something I know. It has to be hours.
Depends on the event.
It's so hard to judge. I mean, like, for example, my next 2 events are Vernonia and Hag Lake. It's a point-to-point marathon, and it's a beast. I mean, it is. And then Hag Lake is like, okay, go around the lake one time. I'll just stand here, you run. And it's much simpler. So, and so each race is a little bit different. And the other thing too about is, it's in large part about timing, like 6 months out, you're getting your permits, blah, blah, blah. It's real intense. And then you get your registration live. And then you sit back and kind of take it easy for a month or 2, not much to do. And then a month before, there's a whole bunch of stuff to do and so on, so it really depends. And I don't ever want to.
It also depends if your race has a co-race director, so you're not doing all the work yourself.
Yeah. Some races, I delegate to many people for Vernonia, but but other races have co-race directors, and it's just, I don't know what the number is, but it's a lot of hours, and I never want to find out, because that's how crazy I am.
I don't like being on the board. Deb?
Yeah.
Let's see. I'll get my hand down. Mark, I'm just really glad that you simplified it to the one proposal, because I had all these thoughts like, would we be accused of self-dealing? Is this is this something that would need to go to the membership and have to go into the bylaws? So I think that, like, I appreciate the idea of really supporting race directors, because it's a ton of work, and I think it was complicated. So I think this is a better proposal. I'm a little confused from what Daniel said. How many, is it just one race entry per race that you direct? Like, I don't really understand. Free entry to any event you want, all events all year long?
Yeah. For myself, okay, we have 10 events on the calendar right now?
Yeah.
10.
So any one of you board members would then get a free entry to any one of these events, to any event throughout. You can all 10 events. You can do all 10.
Yeah. In my case, I am a director or co-director of 4 of those 10. So I'm there anyway, busy. So if I wanted, there's 6 events that I could do for free. The thing about it is, you think about it, if we have the gamut from 5Ks to ultras, and I can't see, any person, wanting to do all of them anyway, in terms of a person's interest in running, they would, Hag Mud, for example, either you'll love it or you hate it, and some people will never, here's a free, we'll pay you money to do Hag Mud, and they still wouldn't do it. So I don't see it as a big issue of overwhelming a budget by people choosing to do it. I mean,
Yeah, I was just curious. The only thing you risk is, you're taking away the volunteer incentive for us to come and volunteer at the races now. Haha. Except there's the President's Award, so that's fine.
People do both. They volunteer and then run, depending on what they volunteer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Volunteer then run then volunteer. Yeah. They are not mutually exclusive.
Well, no, I was just saying that if I, as a board member get free entry to any race, then why should I come volunteer at races anymore? Oh, it's fun. Yeah, I forgot that part. Just joking. So the other question I had seriously though was about the expense of like mileage, and that do we have a process or a form for mileage reimbursement? Because it seems reasonable that someone who has to, you know, for me, it's an hour drive out to Hag to volunteer. It seems reasonable that mileage reimbursement would be an option for a race director.
Yes, it is. There is a specific, ORC has a reimbursement form, and one of the line items on there is for mileage. So it's in the system already. Me, I'm simple as say, give me $20, cover the gas, I'm good. You know, but there is a, you know, because like, you know, it changes with the IRS and all that, you know, there's the amount changes every year, but that is a line item on the reimbursement form. So that's it. That RVs can get, yes.
Val?
Oh, I just wanted to remind everybody that like if somebody volunteers at a race for a few hours, they're getting $50 off a race. So I think it's pretty reasonable for the people that are putting in all these hours to have the free entries. And like you said, like there's no way you could pay me to do Hag Mud. So races.
I'm not running that thing.
I lost my other thought. So oh, I was just gonna say that like as a board member, we're kind of all representing the club. So I personally feel like it's kind of an obligation to try to volunteer, but it's also what makes the club fun, seeing people and doing that.
Well, and I would also say that a lot of you who are on the board were invited to join the board because you not only participated, but you also volunteered. And so we knew you were already kind of invested in the club and wanted to make it better. So that's one of the reasons why you were asked to join. So
just to be clear, Valerie, I was only joking about that.
I know, I just had to rub it in.
Okay.
I want to amend my proposal to make it mandatory for everyone to do Hag Mud. Not at all. Sorry, I didn't.
Is there a buyout fee, like donation to the club?
Okay.
No, they're gonna throw a bucket of mud at you or something. I don't know. No.
So not seeing any more hands up, I think we're good with the discussion. So Mark has presented the proposal that all race directors, board members, and coordinators get free race entry to any ORRC race in the year that they're serving in their capacity. Do I have a second for that? Susan Cooper seconds. Okay.
I second that.
All right.
For discussion, one question.
Sure.
So in the year of their race, so is that the calendar year or a year following their race? Do we need to define that?
I think it's the calendar year. I think I wrote in there.
So that would be
During
like
my original text says during the calendar year that they serve. Is that that's what I have in my thing. Is that what you have written down, Deb?
So
yes,
if you did
that's
Turkey
what I
Trot,
have.
for example, if you were the director of that, would you have needed to use any free entries the previous, 10 months before November started?
Correct.
Well, in practice, the way it's done, if I'm scheduled to direct Vernonia in 2024, I could have signed up to do Hag Mud in 2024. It's during a calendar year that I serve.
If you're the director, you certainly are aware that you're doing that coming up, and you would know that you could sign up for those races in advance.
If you're a board member during 2024, anytime, it's during a calendar year.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because we'll be starting the race calendar in October. Hopefully before that.
Hopefully before that, yeah.
So, okay, Joe?
Well, I totally trust everybody here to abide by that, but in the past we've had, I know of some people that have taken perks and then moved out of town and not really done much. So, I mean, if in the future somebody volunteered to direct a race in the future and then bailed on it, they might there's a potential to take advantage of that. So I don't know. I think maybe it might be better to have it be a future race in the year following the event, just as a more practical way to do it. So I just think that might be a concern, but I trust everybody here that to abide by that calendar year proposal. But I don't know, this is going to be something that will be ongoing. So I think it's important to be a little careful about it.
I hear you, Joe. I mean, I'm generally a trusting person. I hear you that, you know, it potential for abuse there, but I trust people, and I think if we're going to be recruiting and vetting race directors, we'll get that sense of, you know, is this person in it for compensation or for the love of running, you know?
And realistically, if they abuse it and then they bail and they're not a race director, we're not out a lot of money. It's just, okay, that guy didn't work out as race director, he's gone. Lesson learned,
Yeah,
you know, let's move on and not worry. Create the rule for the 99% who do it ethically, not the 1% that are going to abuse it.
Well, yeah, but it might encourage people that would act that way. That's just a danger. That's all.
Yeah. I think, it's just a matter of vetting who we're going to bring on. And and honestly, it is going to, there's some people who will volunteer to do some things and they won't work out. They just won't do the job very well, or they won't do it at all. And we'll just have to, we'll get ghosted, and we'll just need to move on and find somebody and kind of move on from there. But
True, but I just think there's some things like this might encourage people like that to show up and do things. That's just a danger, just something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's reasonable thing. Yeah.
I want to say that it, like back in the old days when Tracy and Julia were running the show, we always wanted people on the board and race directors that had done a lot volunteer work and been part of the club. And I think that's where we can really watch that, because the people that we have had the big problem with in the past, they just showed up kind of out of the blue and hadn't been part of the club or participating or volunteering. So I think that's might help us kind of watch that.
Yeah, I guess along those lines. I mean, I know some of the situations like Joe's referencing that wasn't hypothetical. Like, we were short of board members, so I think it's okay to say it was suggested, hey, if you join the board, you'll get this nice jacket, you'll get free race entries for the year. I mean, I was there when that happened. And then some people joined the board and they moved out of town like 3 months later. And Steve even knew they were going to do that. Anyway.
Yeah.
So we want to kind of just, I don't know, not set us up for that, but I guess we've already talked about it. But
so one of the things that Daniel brought up, though, I think is a valid point of, you know, is this going to be tracked by the race director on comp fees, and seeing how much that is, that affects the race numbers or the race money. So that might be something that I still would like to see. If it becomes like big numbers, like all of us all of a sudden show up for a race, right? Instead of volunteering or something, that could really skew some numbers. So,
like Tracy was saying, that is trackable. The each run sign up listing, if they got a comp, it says they paid 0, and it'll have the coupon code that they use, so that is entirely trackable. And so that's be worth something to remind race directors to do, is to track that, and include that in their race report. I mean, it would be a worthy thing to.
I'd be curious for 2 things. If Adnan, if you could find out of the current of the races in both current and past races, how many coupons were used over the last year, for example, in our events. And also just kind of just a reminder to the race directors of, if you're basing your budget on, like he said, if you're basing it on 300 runners and 250 you're paying, Or my bigger concern was, okay, if you have 300 runners, how many are ORRC members? And so you're charging 45, but they're getting the member discount of 15. So make sure your budget is based on what you think, maybe if you have 300, this many are ORRC members, so they're paying this many are non-ORRC members, and this many are using free coupons. Kind of figure out your budget based on who you think is paying what.
Yeah. Here we got a lot to do. Let's move on.
All right, not having any more discussion, let's go ahead and vote on the proposal then. All in favor of the proposal, say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Nope. All right, motion passes.
All right.
Thank you, Mark, and thank everybody that was a really, really good discussion, and I'm really glad I'm very appreciative of this board that we are all civil and open and will listen to differing opinions because it's nice to be heard.
You mean there's another way of doing it?
Okay, it is 8:10. I just wanted a couple of updates. Mark, can you update us really quick on Vernonia since that's coming up this weekend?
There are two things race directors can't control. One is the weather, and the forecast looks to be good. Low in the 40s, high in the 60s, cloudy, no rain. So, that's good. The second thing that race directors have not enough control over is volunteers. And in that way, I am not doing as well as I wish I were doing. I've got two groups that how can I say, I am 30 volunteers short at this point. And I've got two groups who have a month ago said they could provide, 15 to 20 each. So if they both come through, I'm good. If they don't, it's going to be as I always do. It's about prioritizing.
So Mark, did you see the email from Barbara Kraft today?
I did not check my email. How many did she have?
She said that she has about 10 students that can help.
Oh, good. So that'll help. Okay.
So just, if you didn't see that, take a look at that. That would be helpful.
This morning, because I've been talking to her. Because what I'm going to do, she's got a good. Her crew covers the half marathon start and the aid station there, and what I'm going to do is borrow some of her people and put them on aid stations. So that'll help there. I guess we're how can I say, for you out there who have not yet signed up to volunteer, let me encourage you to do so. And there's some very specific things that I need. How can I say? I've got two leadership positions that I need, which specifically at the finish line. There's two shifts. There's a 9 to 12:30 and a noon to 3:30 shift, being the leader at the finish line, and I need good people for that. So if you are willing and able, sign up, give me a call, send me an email, let's talk, because those are two very important positions, because things just have to work there. And
what's involved in that, Mark? What's involved in that? Because I would be willing to help you.
Being bossy. No.
No problem. So, all right.
It involves knowing where stuff is supposed to be and being bossy to get people, not bossy, but to let people know what to do. And as part of that, I would definitely want you to get a preview. In other words, Saturday from 2 till 6, we will be doing setup and pack and pickup. And somewhere in that time, whoever serves as the finish line leader, I would want them to come to the school so we can actually walk on the track and this is this and that is that. And so you understand fully what's going on. I mean, that's part of it.
Okay, you tell me what time you want me to be there and I'm happy to help you. I'm scheduled to be there for packet pickup early Sunday morning, and I'll just continue to stay on for that part of it. But tell me what time you want me there Saturday and I'm happy to help.
Well, I'm saying probably because
or you can let me know later.
Well, I'm just thinking probably about if it's probably about 5 o'clock, because things are kind of kind of quiet down, and by 5 o'clock, I will be able to step away and I can show you around the track and all that.
All right, I'll commit to helping you on that, so.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And beyond that, so those are, like I said, those are the 2 leadership positions I need filled. Is, like the finish line, and there's 2 shifts. So Deb, if you're open for a long day, it'd be from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. If that sounds too long for you, then I can, find a second person. We'd be done noonish, and then I'd find someone to take over for you. And finding you a good crew of at least 10 people to help you with all that has to happen there at the finish line.
Okay.
And anyone else who does not want a leadership position, any aid stations are a good place to sign up for. I've got at Top Hill, at Buxton, Manning, and Crossman, those aid stations. I could use a couple more people. And then if nothing else, I've got basically for most of the people need to be are at aid stations. And then I think of it as 3 shifts. There's a 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. shift, which is packet pickup and parking. And everybody gets on the bus. That's the first shift. The second shift is roughly 9 to noon. That's when, the half marathoners are finishing mostly, and then noon to 3, which is, most of the marathon finishers. And if you could even spare, a couple hours to take one of those shifts, that would be awesome. Or friends and family, neighbors, dogs and cats, the whole bit. And even if it's to come in for 1 shift for 3 hours, either the 6 to 8, 9 to noon, noon to 3, that will help. So I don't know. This is one of those things. It's like, it always works out. I don't know how, I don't know why, but it always works out. So I'm trying to find that balance internally between the panic of, will I have enough people, to trusting that it's all going to work out. And as St. Julie of Norwich is famously known for saying, all shall be well, all manner of things shall all be well. And I have to live by that, because that's how I survive as a race director. All shall be well.
That's fantastic, Mark. I want to mention I will be there Sunday morning on my bike for the I forget exactly what it's called, like the marathon start position.
Yes.
So I'm happy to act as like a flex volunteer, maybe at some of the aid stations. I can go around if necessary in the morning.
Yes, let's talk before race day, so we can, that's awesome. Let's talk so specifically what you can do to help. But let's talk.
Absolutely.
Yeah, give me a call. So so Vernonia, at this point, it's like everything's been ordered and the food's going to be there, and it's weather and volunteers, and so that's what's going to that. Moving along, I got the next race, Hag Lake, which I said it's a simpler, logistically simpler race, and everything for that's in place except for volunteers. But I'm going to get through Vernonia first, and then I'm going to do the push for volunteers for Hag Lake. But Hag is by comparison just so simple, and but that's on track to go well, to be fine as well. Any questions about Hag Lake or Vernonia?
I have a question for you. What time are you loading up on Saturday so I could bring the food by?
Well, we're loading up on Friday.
Oh, Friday.
Yeah. Well, either or, because we're loading up at the garage. I'm thinking at this point probably 1 p.m. on Friday that we're loading up at the ORRC garage, but we are unloading at Banks Middle School on Saturday starting at 2 o'clock.
2 in the afternoon?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just meet you out there at 2 on Saturday then.
Yeah, I think that would be simpler. Yeah, because that way that's one less thing we'd have to reload and move around. We don't have to unload.
I'll just load it up, and then I'm picking up Friday afternoon, late afternoon. So
So just be at Banks Middle School 2 o'clock on Saturday, and we'll make that part of the unload.
Okay.
And I know for Vernonia, we are right around where we were last year. You had 517 people signed up so far for all 3 events. So it's going good.
Yeah. Numbers are good.
I also wanted to just give a have fun comment to all of you who are going to the RRCA convention, because we
Oh,
won't see you before the convention. And I know Adnan, you ended up not being able to go, so it's just the five, one, two, three, yeah, five, yeah, 5 people going.
Mhm. 5, yeah.
Okay. So have fun.
Our,
Yeah.
just one thing, our registrations come with the free 5K, so I signed up for the free 5K if anybody else wants to.
Mhm. Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Signed up for the half.
You signed, was it free half?
It wasn't free.
Oh, I was
No,
gonna
it's
say,
not
wait a
free.
minute, what did I miss?
No, but I
Yeah.
found like an ambassador discount code, so it was like $15 off, but no, it wasn't free.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking about that. The other two, those who part of the weekend are the morning runs. That is an awesome thing to do. Be sure it's worth getting up early to join the group runs because you get little mini tours of the city. And it kind of varies because in Des Moines, Iowa, oh God, there's nothing in Des Moines, Iowa. Corn and pig farm. Okay. And so it's like the morning runs were just boring. Okay. On the other hand, the convention, when it was in Fredericksburg, Virginia, it's the site of a Civil War battle. And so, Pocahontas was there, and President Madison retired there, and it's steeped in history, and to do a morning run and just be steeped in all the history is awesome. So make the morning runs part of your routine. It's worth getting up.
When we were in Orlando, we spent the morning runs looking out for alligators.
Probably a good idea.
All right, I don't want to keep you guys too long. I know that we have a bunch of other things that are going on that are still in the works. I know we have a solstice meeting tomorrow night, so we can work on that. And I know Margie's working on the member picnic. It's got a lot of good fun stuff going on there. But everything else is kind of moving along. So we can talk more about those upcoming events at the next meeting. And we're also kind of revisit our SWOT analysis at the next meeting, kind of see where we've gone.
Can I throw in one more thing?
Sure.
Just 2 minutes, 2-minute thing. Because I put it out there already. Is again, something we have done in the past is to host an RRCA level 1 coaching clinic. And right now, and the RRCA will not schedule a class until they have assure there's a certain minimum people who are interested in signing up. And so that's why I put out the word, and I've gotten, I think 9, they say RRCA said they need 12 to 15 people willing to take the class before they'll schedule it. And this one I've got, I think 9 people that have expressed some interest. So if you have not yet, just quick email, hey, Mark, would love to take the class, something like that. So that'll help me have a head count. And when I get to about 12 or 15 people, then it'll be like, okay, now I can start the process of hosting a class. So there's some interest. I need a little bit more.
We'll put that in the next newsletter that goes at the end of April.
Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome.
Okay.
And are you saying the interest on Facebook, Mark?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Those are some of the numbers I'm including are from Facebook. Some people have emailed me, and some people are the Facebook responses.
Okay.
Cool. Daniel?
I wanted to see if I could get some help with an event. I've got I've contacted Carmen Jakinski, and we are looking to have a walking clinic for 6 to 12 members. She needs an hour. We've tentatively set up, I believe it's the 21st of May at Tualatin Hills Turpinning Center. That's the big one. And so if somebody could help me with publicity for that, to get that, I want to get that out. I don't have a whole lot to say because she's just going to show you the difference between walking and walking. And I don't think that, I mean, what if you guys know Carmen, she knows that walking is more than just putting one foot in front of the other. But she's doing that as a courtesy, and the cost is 15 minutes at the end of the clinic. She's going to try and sell some of her shoes.
but she's doing that for us, and so we're getting that going. I just need to figure out how to get it out there so people can sign up. She needs at least 6 people to make it worthwhile. So between 6 and 12, and she can do as many as 15. It's going to be outdoors, so it's going to be in the evening. Weather is going to be an important thing, but that's happening. So I will try to get as many details as I can in the next few days. But I've really got a busy week right now. I wanted to say one thing about summer solstice, if I may, and then I can curb it. As you guys know, summer solstice, Blue Lake has been under some construction, and it's due to open at the end of next month. They are holding a tour on the 16th, which I believe is next Tuesday at noon. And I plan to go, where they're going to actually be showing a lot of the people, the groups that are having events in the next few months, what the changes are going to be, what's going to be available, how things are going. So they seem to be proceeding apace. We finally got our course approved Friday. So now I'm scrambling to get all the paperwork together now that it was hurry up and wait and wait and wait. And now it's hurry up again. So Tracy, I'll be in touch with you to get some certificates of insurance and get that going. But as she said, we're meeting tomorrow. And we'll have a whole lot more details probably after that meeting and after this next week. Thank you.
Awesome. Anything else for the good of the order? Yes, Deb.
Just want to clarify, Danielle, when is this walking clinic that you're holding so I can write that down?
You're on mute, Daniel. You're on mute.
Well, it's good that I'm on mute because I didn't have an answer. So let's look at the calendar. Let me look at the calendar here. May 21, Tuesday evening.
You can also get that into an e-newsletter if I can do that.
Yeah. Could you send out to the board at least the detail or some more details?
I'll give you some more. I don't have them all, but I will do the best I can to get that out there because we just finalized this like last week. Yeah, I'll get something out there to see. And we probably should set up a run sign up just so we have a number, just to make sure that we have some. I mean, if people just show up, I don't think they're going to get turned away. But we should probably at least let her know what we've got anticipating.
We can get that done. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. This was a really good meeting, and I appreciate all of you so much. And we'll see a bunch of you this weekend for Vernonia.
All right. Thank y'all.
Right. Good night.
Thanks, night.
Good night.
Why?